Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be going over the infamous Rookie Rush deck. So for those who don't know what Rookie Rush is, basically it is a aggro deck that is solely focused around playing your level 3s and building up as wide of a board as possible, so that way you can make as many cheap attacks as you possibly can. So again, this is going for a more quantity of attacks over quality of attacks. Being a completely different style deck than what a lot of Digimon has to offer, you're generally going to be running a couple of different cards for very specific abilities. So first, starting up with the Digitama, we're running 4 copies of Upamon. So the primary 2 colors of the deck is going to be blue and green. And Upamon is really good because it gives a win attacking ability. Once per turn, if your opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources, you get to draw 1. So drawing is really important, especially in Rookie Rush, because you don't get the cards back because you're not really Digivolving a whole lot. So we need to run as many cards that we possibly could that are drawing us cards as efficiently as possible, and Upamon is definitely the best Digitama for the deck to do that job. Now, the one of Digitama that I'm going to be running in this deck is Argomon. So Argemon is really only in here just because he is our 5th Digitama, on top of which we are primary blue and green, so we generally have a lot more blue and green Digimon, so he still allows us to Digivolve on top of him. And then if our Digimon is somehow able to survive a security check, then the next turn, he'll give us +1 memory, which is pretty good because we want to use our memory as efficiently as possible, and having more just gives us more options. Next, on to the rookies, which is going to be the bulk of the deck. I'm running 4 copies of Armadillomon, so you don't really evolve into Armadillomon, you just play Armadillomon for his cost, and because he has a relatively low cost with some higher DP, this is why we run him, because he's just a very cheap and efficient card. Next up, I'm running 4 copies of Gabumon. So Gabuman is in here just because he has a when played of drawing us a card, and again, the deck does not really Digivolve a whole lot outside of the Digitamas, so we still need ways to generate cards in our hand. So Gabumon is really good because he allows us to draw a card, and most of the time we're going to be playing him anyway. So we don't necessarily care about his DP, we just care about the fact that he draws us a card. Next up, I'm running 4 copies of Gomamon. So Gomamon is just another value vanilla card. We're just playing him because he is very cheap to play. Next, I'm running 4 copies of Bearmon or Kumamon. So Bearmon is in here for a similar reason that Gomamon is in here. He's a good Digimon that we want to see to Digivolve with. So he has a low Digivolution cost with some relatively higher DP, in contrast to a lot of the other Digimon in his level. So he's just in here just because he's about the same to play as almost every other card in this entire deck except for 1. And he's just another efficient value card. Next, I'm running Goblimon. So Goblimon is the Gabumon in green. Don't really need much of an explanation outside of value vanilla card. Next up, we're running 4 copies of Mushroomon, because Mushroomon is in here for the same exact reason Armadillomon is in here, because he is very cheap to play with some relatively high DP. And then 4 copies of Argomon, because again, same reason why Goblimon, just value vanilla card. Next, 4 copies of Tapirmon. So Tapirmon is pretty good because he has a when destroyed, draw a card effect, and because we want to basically have him suicide into the opponent's security, because most of the time he's just going to end up losing the security check anyway. It's still nice to see that we have other ways of drawing cards, and this is just a very decent rookie to allow us to draw cards. Next, I'm running 2 copies of Bearmon. So Bearmon is in here for a similar reason that Tapirmon is in here, but Bearmon's On Destruction ability gives us +1 memory. but the condition for that is a little bit different than Tapirmon's because it has to be destroyed during our turn in order for us to get the +1 memory. But, you know, if we're suiciding into the opponent's security anyway, then it's going to happen more often than not. And then the last rookie in the deck is 4 copies of Kudamon. So Kudaman is in here because he has a when attacking ability where if we have 4 cards or less in our hand, then we get to draw 1. So he is just another way for us to draw cards efficiently in that rookie slot. So that's the only real reason why he's in here, because, you know, drawing cards is really important, so that way we could actually play the game and continue, because we don't have a whole lot of card draw, because we're not digivolving a whole lot. And then as far as the only Mega in the deck, we're running 4 copies of Puppetmon, and Puppetmon is really only in here for his when played ability to just lock the opponent's field down. So he has a when played ability. You get to rest one of your opponent's Digimon down, and during your opponent's next active phase, all Digimon on the opponent's field cannot be made active. So this is really, really powerful and really, really important, because if they're trying to race us, then Puppetmon just basically lets us win that race, and he even can rest down a blocker, so that way it can't even block during our turn. So Puppetmon is just a very, very powerful and very, very potent card for this deck. On top of which, he even has his own when attacking ability, where we get to gain +1 memory. And even though we don't necessarily really need the +1 memory, it doesn't hurt to have it, because it just allows us to have more options in our mid to late game in order to play other cards. Then, as far as options go, we're running 4 copies of Vulcan's Hammer, because this is just free +1 memory, and then in our security, it's +2 memory, which potentially could really screw up the opponent's turn, so that's why it's in here. And then the last option we're running is 4 copies of Flower Cannon. So Flower Cannon, basically all it does is rest one of our opponent's Digimon down, and then if it's in the security, it rests all of our opponent's Digimon down without blocker. So even though it doesn't necessarily rest the blocker down, if this is shown relatively early, if the opponent is trying to race us, then it rests all of their other Digimon down so that we could potentially win the damage race. And then as far as other cards you could possibly run or think about for the deck, you could run Elecmon, because he's just another value vanilla. If you're really afraid of losing the damage race, you could potentially run Gatsumon, because Gatsumon is a rookie blocker. If you want something with a little bit more DP, then you could play Betamon or Mushroomon. They're basically filling the same role of being a very cost-efficient rookie with some very high DP. You could also play Gomamon, because Gomamon has a really nice ability of he reduces his cost for every one of my opponent's Digimon without a Digivolution source. So if they're trying to race us and they're not really Digivolving a whole lot either, then this card reduces his cost, making him even more efficient to play. Then, if we need more ways of gaining memory, you could also run Gravity Crush, because Gravity Crush is just +2, and then at the end of your turn, -2. So if the opponent has a tamer that changes their memory to 3, then we could use this to set them up to have 1, and then at the end of our turn, they'll get 2 to be at 3, so that way their tamer isn't really as useful as it seems. You could run Hornbuster, because it is a relatively cheap buff spell, on top of which, if it's in our security, then we get to rest one of the opponent's Digimon down, and add this card to our hand. So if we really want to try to push more aggression on the value of our Digimon's attacks, then this card is a fantastic card of doing that. If you want some good removal options, you could run Heat Viper. So by destroying one of our Digimon, we get to destroy 2 of the opponent's level 4 or less Digimon. If we really need to get through a wall of blockers or try to kill off some of the opponent's Digimon before they could really get started with Digivolving, then Heat Viper is a pretty solid removal option for that. You could also think about running Skullgreymon, because we're not really Digivolving into him. He just has a nice when played ability to destroy one of the opponent's Digimon with blocker. So again, if our rookies are having a hard time with a blocker, this is a good anti-blocker card. And then another card you could possibly think about is Chimeramon. So Chimeramon is just more efficient removal, where he has a when played ability, so we don't care about digivolving into him. We get to destroy one of our Digimon to destroy one of the opponent's level 5 or less Digimon. So it doesn't exactly kill off a Mega, but it kills off basically everything else. So that's pretty strong considering there are some cards that are in the ultimate slot that we might need to get rid of. And Chimeramon is a pretty efficient card at getting rid of it, because these types of cards, these ultimates with when played, are still very, very valuable over the option contemporaries most of the time, because it still leaves us with a body on board. And again, the whole point of Rookie Rush is to flood the field with as many bodies to get as many attacks in as possible. Even though they're really costly to play most of the time, they still definitely would help the deck out, or could help the deck out. So for the most part, this is just what Rookie Rush is. It's exactly in the title. You just play a whole bunch of rookies as efficiently as you can and try to play the most efficient and most valuable rookies that you possibly can, so that way you could deal as much damage as quickly as possible to try to win the game very fast. That's kind of all I really have on this deck profile. As always, I'll have the deck list in the description below, and feel free to leave any comments if you have any comments or questions about the deck. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video.